copper jewellery's always been popular. And that's enamelled copper, but the metal itself is very beautiful. Here it is there in the form of a pendant. It's got this lovely rosy glow. And, in fact, that's a copper ring, and it's the very thing we're about to make. It's surprisingly simple, and it's a very attractive piece of jewellery. To start with, of course, you need copper, which you can get in the form of either a chunk of old washing copper, or if you know a plumber, a bit of old copper pipe, or really just an offcut of copper sheet. But start with something that's not too thick. That's about the right sort of thickness to begin with. And you need to really texture the surface to make it more interesting. Now, a traditional surface is dimpling, and you do that with a hammer like this. You see the rounded bit on the hammer? That's just producing dimples as you hit. That's used in tankards, and it's used in copper jewellery. But if you haven't got a dimpling hammer, you can make do by getting your copper like that and using something like a chisel, and that will give you a surface of this kind, sort of hatching like that. Or you can use something like a nail head on the side. That'll give you funny little indentations like that. Anything at all which will texture the surface does the job. But I'm going to use the dimpling hammer because it produces the best kind of surface that I know. And in fact, I've already worked on this, hitting it all over to produce a dimpled surface. And there we are, very much like the tankard that you saw. Well, as you work on this, and I'm using a brick as an anvil, that's perfectly okay. Something smooth and hard is all you need. As you work on it, you'll stretch the metal in one direction more than the other, and the whole thing will dish. You can see it there catching the light. So before you go any further, once you've dimpled it, take it to a piece of wood, turn it dimpled side down, and hit it with the flat of the hammer. And that will straighten the whole thing out. There we are. The reason for the wood is that it doesn't destroy the texture you've put in there, and it doesn't scratch it either. And there it is, a nice flat dimpled surface ready to be worked upon. Well, if I was going to make a ring for myself, I'd need to measure my finger. Let's say I take the little finger there. Take a piece of paper, a strip of paper really, about the width you want, wrap it round the part of the finger where you want the ring to be, make sure it overlaps, and where it's fairly loose, get a pair of scissors and just cut the whole thing through. Here we go. Down there and snip. And what you're left with around the finger is the length of copper you're going to need. And I can now take a pen, using that as a ruler, go to the dimpled copper, start at one end, go to the other, and that's the length of the strip that will fit my finger. Very simple, really. Now, cutting copper is not too hard. It's in fact rather soft metal, even once it's been beaten, and you might find you can get away with a pair of scissors, providing they're not your parents' best scissors. You can see that's cutting quite easily. If scissors won't do it for you, and it can be hard if you've got small hands, tin snips might do. Just cut a good parallel strip all the way down to that mark, and then across. And theoretically, that's a strip of copper to be turned into a ring of the right size. Now, of course, the cutting curls it, so once again, back to the wood and the hammer. And that's the first part of the ring. But of course, it has to go round the finger. Don't worry at this stage about the rough edges or the dinged edges. You want to turn into a ring first, so get a piece of pipe or rod or anything round, even an old broomstick will do, or a bit of doweling, and work the copper around that. First of all with your fingers, and secondly with the hammer. But rather than ding the metal too hard, work with the wooden part of the hammer, and that will bend it without marking it. Well, that's going to take me a bit of time to work around, so we'll come back to that in a tick and finish the whole thing off. Curiosity. And back to the copper jewellery, because we now have a ring, but we don't have a join. You can see how badly those ends are fitting each other. And you have to make them fit exactly. You can do it by a combination of cutting, like that, bending one inside the other and then reverse it, and, if you like, or you really must, I suppose, filing, like that, getting a file in the gap, or pulling sandpaper through them, first on one side and then on the other. In any event, you have to keep going until the join is as good as this. Really, a hairline crack you can only just see, because unless those two sides are touching perfectly, the solder won't flow. And soldering is what's going to keep your ring together. And you do it like this. First of all, get this sort of solder. Any hardware store will have it. It comes like wire, and inside it is this miraculous stuff called flux. I'm going to take a little bit off like that. The flux comes out under heat, flows into the join, and keeps the metal clean. So that, in fact, the solder sticks to it, and then the join sticks to itself, or the two sides do. And you want about as much as that. So really, I suppose, it goes halfway across the ring. You can see it in there, lying on the crack itself, and I hang the ring up on the point of a file or a nail or anything like that. That's about ready for the soldering. The solder's on the crack, I'm holding it on the point, and I can transfer it to something as simple as a candle flame. And here we go, in the candle flame, and you have to leave it, I suppose, for, I don't know, about a minute, minute and a half. There we are, melting now, and you can see the flux went, now the metal's going, and it's going into the crack between the two ends of the copper. And as you get it hotter, it flows in and really does the job of joining it. Well, that's pretty hot now. We can cool it off in water. And it's instantly cool. I can dig it out, and it's just ready for finishing. That join, black as it is neatly soldered. Well, those ends are fairly rough from the hammering, so take a piece of sandpaper or wet and dry and work the edge like that. And as you do that, just keep checking. Eventually you'll find it comes up pink all round, and that will mean it's ground down to a nice flat finish. Turn it over, do the other side, and when you're happy with that, make sure it hasn't got a rough finish for the finger by finishing off with sandpaper or a file on the outside and on the inside, like that. Then a final burnish with steel wool, and you'll end up with this sort of effect. A ring which is not only soldered very neatly along the join, but burnished and smooth and fitted to you.